One question I get asked is what exactly a dire version of an animal is in Dungeons & Dragons. The answer is that the term was invented by Monty Cook, according to Monty Cook, when the team of Wizards at the Coast was creating the 3rd edition of D&D over the 3 years prior to it being published in 2000. And I quote, "When we were developing 3rd edition, we recognized that we needed animals that could serve as appropriate foes and allies for mid and high level characters to help druid and ranger abilities continue to be valuable. It was my idea to create dire versions of various animals based on the dire wolf-wolf dichotomy. I know it only makes sense in D&D sort of way." End quote. In later uses of the term, it was applied to the animal form of the weremole, which in all other sources is listed as a giant mole. The dire mole is not described anywhere else other than for lycanthropes, so things became a bit messy with what a dire animal is. There is also the added confusion that the term dire does show up in earlier editions, so I think that Monty was talking about a sort of template, a theme outside of any historical accuracy, but I think it could do with some more investigation. When in doubt, go back to the source. So let's take a good look at the dire wolf and its history. Dire wolves originated around 250,000 years ago in California and Nebraska, spreading across the open terrain of America before expanding eastward and displacing an ancestral species, eventually spreading across the entire American and South American continent. They were not the ancestors of wolves, they were as distinct from wolves as coyotes and dogs. However, they could still crossbreed with grey wolves according to specimens examined from the La Brea tar pits. Dire wolves are a great example of a hypermorph, a species that increases in size thanks to an abundance of food. There were lots of other species of canines around, but the dire wolves were a bit larger and had the strongest bite force of all existing canines at the time, because they preyed on western horses, ground sloths, mastodons, ancient bison, and camels. Dire wolves were not the largest canines ever, nor did they have the strongest bite force in any canine ever. That would be the Epicyon haydeni, which lived in the Miocene. Its name means more than a dog. So about 6 million years ago, it was much more like what you would find in the monster manual for the dire wolf. Actual dire wolves would be similar enough to the grey wolves that really you could use the same stat block in D&D to represent them both. If you are being historically accurate, maybe give them a higher chance to crit on a bite attack, or slip them a few extra hit points. So, departing from Earth and its ancient mammals, we now know a dire animal is not necessarily the prehistoric ancestor of its current species. It's just a larger, more aggressive, and for lack of a better word, more monstrous version of another animal. The artists took some liberties with the monstrous side of it and gave them a more demonic look, with barbs, spikes, or horns also sprouting from their skeleton, usually on the head, back, and forelimbs, but quite randomly. Dire animals in D&D represent both a larger and more feral form, and imply that if a lone creature of this kind happens to dwell in a certain place and interact with humanoids, it's likely to slip into the category of a legendary creature, such as the lion that Hercules battled and later wore its super tough pelt. 3rd edition D&D did not invent dire animals, but it did give us an excellent system that allowed us to just apply a template or fix adjustments to any animal stat block to turn it into a dire version of that creature. Templates take all the guesswork out of it and are very easy to use at the table, no need to worry about calculating it all by yourself. However, some creatures are the actual prehistoric animals, or things that may have never existed on Earth, like the tundra yeti, for example, as far as we know. The mammoth, Megaloceros, also known as the Irish elk, the ground sloth, the cave bear, the zeugolon, a long sinuous predatory whale species, are all prehistoric creatures that can still thrive on fantasy worlds that saw such species avoid their extinctions. But being dire in Dungeons & Dragons' sense now diverges away from just prehistoric and includes the monstrous. So a dire creature is larger, more feral, and their protruding bony spikes and ridges are simply fanciful inventions for our fantasy worlds. So it is acceptable to call a creature dire if it is larger, more savage, and a bit mutated. It doesn't have to be a prehistoric version of any animal. Okay, so let's very quickly cover lots of different dire critters across the editions. Books. A dire wolf in D&D is a version of the grey wolf. It's 8 feet long and weighs about 700 pounds. They are encountered individually, which is typical for dire creatures, or in packs of between 5 and 8 creatures. They used 5 and 8 creatures ubiquitously across many dire animals, regardless of their actual ecology. A dire bear is a massive creature up to 20 feet long and massing 6,000 pounds, easily able to rend opponents to bloody chunks with its huge claws, basically sinks one on either side of you and then opens up your ribcage. Dire bears prefer colder climates and only come together to mate and are often kept as pets of stone giants. A dire ape looks similar to a gorilla but is 8 feet tall and weighs around 600 to 1,000 pounds. They are very aggressive and can tear a human to pieces if they get both hands clamped on them. A dire wolverine is only ever found alone or with a mate. They can grow to 12 feet in length and 2,000 pounds of terrifying muscle, fangs and claws. Completely without fear, a dire wolverine will attack with jaw and claws, and if wounded in combat, they go into a frenzy, just like the dire badger. Dire badgers grow to about 7 feet in length, weighing 500 pounds. If wounded, they go into a frenzy that will not stop until either it or its opponent is killed. Dire weasels have always been a particular terror of mine, thanks to an encounter with one in AD&D. They grow to 6 feet long and 400 pounds, sneaky ambush predators that can latch on and drain the blood out of a victim. They are often kept and trained by kobold tribes. Dire rats can be encountered individually, but you are most likely to find them in packs of up to 20 individuals, and they like to attack together, which, well, while each dire rat is only about 3 feet long and 60 pounds, they do carry the filth fever disease and are very mobile, being good swimmers and climbers that can attack you from any angle. Dire lions are up to 20 feet long and weigh 3,500 pounds, can sneak up on travelers using long elephant grass fields to conceal themselves. Dire lions are quite cunning and are prized pets of cloud giants. They consider the domestically bred black dire lion to be the best, and some stormlords are known to ride them. Dire tigers are... I haven't actually covered the dire tigers. Dire boars look like wild boars that have reached 16 feet long and weighing a ton. Dire boars are ferocious in a fight, and their tusks can rip a person apart very quickly. Do not underestimate how fast and deadly a dire boar can be, or how tough, and they can remain standing even with fatal wounds and keep on fighting until they bleed out and die. Dire sharks grow to 50 feet long and weigh 20,000 pounds, so think Jaws and increase the size a bit more. They're basically the megalodons, and like other sharks, they have an extremely good sense of smell, tracking blood in the water from miles away and hunting down their prey. In the Dragon Magic sourcebook, there's a listing for a draconic kind of cat-like predator called the Diaphoric Phoenixkin, which is spelled in the most annoying way possible, and I don't like it. The Fiend Folio also has the dire rhinoceros. Frostburn, Sandstorm, and Stormwrack, the environmental sourcebooks, contain the dire barracuda, dire eel, dire hippopotamus, dire jackal, dire puma, dire tortoise, dire vulture, dire eagle, dire polar bear, dire megaloceros, or the Irish elk, as I was mentioning, the dire glyptodon, which is one of those his prehistoric armadillos the size of a wagon with a spiked bludgeoning tail club, plus the saber-toothed tiger, the woolly mammoth, and those giant predatory whales, the zeuglon I mentioned earlier. It's getting a bit confusing here. You can see barracudas and eels are included, where normally they wouldn't be dire creatures, they'd be monstrous creatures. Master of the Wild and Monster Manual 2 include the dire elephant, the dire elk, the dire horse, the dire hawk, dire snake, and dire toad. Libris Mortis, the Book of the Dead, of course, contains the dire maggot, which is more accurately a monstrous maggot, as I mentioned, since the dire title is usually reserved for animals, not insects and vermin. So, there you have it. It's quite a large list. No doubt there will be more published over time, and I probably missed some, or one or two. My name is AJ Pickett. Thanks for joining me, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.